you. Thank you all. All right. So I am Valerie Hahn. I go by any pronouns. I'm an off-the-grid homesteader, farmer, and a settler colonist who I currently reside on traditional Haudenosaunee homelands in a buffer zone reserved for hunting between the Gayagohono, Cayuga, and Onondaga nations. So that's near Ithaca, New York. And I also wish to acknowledge that I live in a town called Hartford that provided safe houses on the Underground Railroad to formerly enslaved people who walked 22 miles up our little Valley's Creek in the water to avoid being scented by the hounds of bounty hunters. So that's my land acknowledgement. I like to bring in a little bit of the history that I've learned and being in relationship with this place. And I also am deviant in many respects, but one is that I didn't do a PowerPoint. I like to give the listener control over viewing photos. So in the chat, there is a link there. The first one is my email address, and the second one is a link. And if you click on that, you'll get to a Google document that has a ton of photos because my daughter's just uploaded a whole bunch of new ones in there. So there's lots of like puppies and things in there that is part of our life here at Via Lactea Sanctuary. So and let me know if you can't get into that. And unfortunately, I guess the people that watch this on recording, maybe you can put that link in there too. I don't mind if that's broadly distributed. You can put that link in there.
I was going to ask you if it was okay, and I can do that.
Right. So I've been working on farms for close to 30 years and practicing agriculture in a sacred context for almost 20 years. And I've been doing with my husband regenerative agriculture with grazing animals for 17 years. And I've been an ecological activist and been arrested multiple times in defense of life and ecosystems at places like pipelines, power plants, and once at the New York Stock Exchange. And for the past 6 years, I've been studying at Cherry Hill Seminary in order to build an academic foundation for what we are hoping will be an agriculturally based, earth-centered spiritual practice that is authentic, appropriate, and relevant. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about my experience leading toward that. Currently, I am the founder and director of Via Lactea Sanctuary, a 508c1a faith-based organization working at the intersection of regenerative agriculture and regenerative spiritual practices, which includes supporting ecological activism and racial healing through education, programs, retreats, and reparation. What I'm interested in and what I've wrapped my whole spiritual practice and life ways around is finding a pathway out of the systems that oppress all of us. My family, the folks I live with here in Via Lactea, and I all feel that we are not just up against global climate change as the single or even necessarily the most important threat to restoring a harmonious relationship to our shared earth. All of humanity and the earth itself, we believe, is in a Koaniskatsi moment. And for those of you young ones who missed that groundbreaking film and its connection to a prophecy of the Hopi people about utter destruction and the coming day of purification, that ancient Hopi word means crazy life, life in turmoil, life out of balance, life disintegrating. A state of life that calls for another way of living. So I'd like to share a few principles and practices that I've learned and tried to implement in 35 years of seeking another way of living. And I'd like to try to make them broad enough to be applicable to folks who have not had the opportunity to spend so much of life outside of urban environments and in rural agrarian landscapes and systems. I'm going to put the word Koyaanisqatsi in the chat, and you can look that up and the movie, and it's still, I mean, it's a little dated, the footage, but it's still quite unbelievable film. So let's get into it. Recent elucidations of systems theory explain phenomena in terms of the relationship of component parts to each other and to other systems, rather than looking at individual phenomena in isolation. Pagan animist worldviews also center the relationality of all entities in a cosmic system. So if we look at global climate change through the lens of systems theory, it's not one discrete problem for our society to solve. It is one product among many of dominant forces powering society as it is currently designed. We get what we put in. There's that old saying, garbage in, garbage out. It's a system. So it's not a teleological system where there's some magical God who's going to save us from it. We just get the results of what we do. And so if we want something different, we have to change it. It's the design that must be addressed, not the symptom. So at the level of human civilization, we address system change by changing culture. And worldviews, religious systems of belief and practice shape culture in profound but often unrecognized ways. Analyzing, deconstructing, and reinventing worldview in an embodied, lived, practiced way is the heart of my sacred work on this planet. In the tiny community where I live at Via Lactea, it's an incubator project where we aspire, imperfectly and developing as we go, to practice an embodied spirituality that is authentic, appropriate, and relevant. But before I get into that, I want to illustrate one of my favorite principles. This comes from activist work with groups. Start anywhere, follow it everywhere. That's like a stream. It just starts with a raindrop on a hillside, and it just follows gravity, and it goes wherever gravity takes it. So this is a principle from nature that makes it easier to go forward, is just to follow gravity's pull. And what I followed was food. I started by working at an organic vegan restaurant in my 20s, and then I became a farmer working on CSA farms. And then I stumbled upon some animists who were practicing animal sacrifice in a sacred context. And I was able to eat meat again, doing it that way. And then I moved to an off-the-grid homestead where we produce our own fruit and meat, vegetables, and firewood. And it was finally serendipitously discovering that once we acquired a dairy cow and became people of the cow, that a whole new world of connection to my ancestors, to my indigenous culture, and to the regeneration of the earth opened up. So that's the principle. Start anywhere, no matter how insignificant it seems, and follow your passion for life, spirit, and connection to the earth. Follow it wherever it takes you. That leads me to the second principle that I try to follow. We try to follow at Via Lactea, and that's authenticity. So I invite Earth activists to find spiritual symbols and practices that connect us to embodied ways of creating the change we wish to see. So for me, I now see the cow as the foundation of our community's culture and subsistence. It's what we live on, just as she was the foundation for life of many of our ancestors who were people of the cow. So when I say our, I mean people of the cow, that is anyone from cultures that range from North and Central Africa to Spain and most of Europe, including the British Isles, to Central and East Asia. It's a huge number of people and cultures. These people, some of them, it turned out, ecstatically worshipped cow goddesses as the symbol of life in co-creative relationship with the earth. And they saw her abundance, this incredible alchemical ability to produce more than she takes in, seemingly, as the practical foundation of much that is good and beautiful in the ancient histories of our human culture. So Via Lactea, the cow not only nourishes our health and vitality via milk and meat, but she regenerates our pastures with her trampling and eating and pooping, and she facilitates row cropping by giving us manure. And she is also a living embodiment, not just a symbol, not like looking at some symbol on a wall in an ancient history museum, but a living genetic example of a benefit that was developed and given to us by our ancestors. And she connects us with them. So I find that incredibly powerful. She co-created us and we co-created her. And I could go on about that for a really long time. So I have to stop there. Otherwise, I'll be talking about the cow the whole time. But it's true that placing the cow at the center of my worldview has been possibly the most empowering aspect of this whole project of walking away from dominant oppressive systems. So with that foundation of the cow as the center of our practice, now I've had to really go out on a limb and start this community in order to maintain an integral relationship with the cow, because my two daughters have gone away to school, and my husband and I, two people, can't really properly do off-grid homesteading and dairy cows and regenerative grazing all by ourselves. So that leads us to the next principle, which is trust emergence. I don't know if you've heard this. It's used in activist circles. You know, emergence sort of is a term for kind of this process theology God, but it's also very present. It's the field of what is happening and bubbling up in the moment. It's following whatever is happening. And so now I'm in a continual state of emergence as I attempt to build affinity with other people who would like to join us and follow one potential experimental path toward integral spiritual connection with the earth via the cow. So I read that other EBSAT, I don't know how you say that, if you say EBSAT or EBSAT, another EBSAT presenter is a wild raptor rehabilitation specialist or something like that. And I just want you to know that thinking of the spiritual possibilities offered by following the raptor as a sacred religious symbol, an integral ecological role player, a keystone species, and an ambassador of ecosystems to be protected and restored, and a being with whom we can actually be in sacred co-creative relationship. That is super exciting. So that's just another example of starting from where you are and wrapping your spiritual practice around everything that it leads you to. And it requires empowered from within, in that Starhawk term of empowerment. It requires empowered innovation. So a project like that will require all of your spiritual courage, but it's also very healing work if we take that path, both for ourselves and for the ecosystems that we're part of. Now on to appropriate practice at Via Lactea. First, appropriate means that we are not grabbing at somebody else's sacred. We don't do any ayahuasca or cacao ceremonies on our 72 acres. We don't do an Ipi ceremony or vision quests. We have our own stuff that we're working on, and we're working within mystery traditions. And the reason we don't appropriate is not just because we're purists or we're judgmental or we want to be ethically superior. We avoid others' sacred out of respect and a desire to heal from extractive ways of relating to other human beings and cultures. And also because to stray from looking into and recovering our own sacred traditions for answers to today's problems is actually part of perpetuating systems of destruction and erasure that broke our ancestral connections to earth-centered culture, and that also continue to oppress Indigenous people. So if we, as mostly urban, generally industrialized people, take spiritual practices from Indigenous religions, we're perpetuating colonial systems that are still destroying those cultures. And that leads to reparation, which is one of the pillars of our practice at Via Lactea. And it means learning about and acknowledging harm perpetuated by systems of oppression and working wherever possible to first make amends and do repair. And second, if the avenue is available, to rebuild and heal relationships with individuals and groups historically harmed by oppressive systems that have benefited people systemically awarded privilege. So what I'm saying is that we can't get out of the mess we're in as a human civilization without repairing the harm that the systems that have supported where we are. We can't do that without repairing. And I think that pagan practice provides theological foundation for doing that repair in terms of creating harmony with all beings, and also in terms of sort of an animist perspective that elevates all beings to an equal level of dignity and respect. So Via Lactea, one avenue of reparation we have is giving a percentage of all of our income to other projects that work to end oppression, especially those led by Black, Indigenous, and Asian Americans. And we actively support frontline activists working to defend life and to end oppressive systems. We do that through retreats and participating in things that they're doing. I work as a minister with groups that are doing various activist things. I offer myself in ministry. And reparation may also mean something like this. It's just an invitation. If you are going to take the ayahuasca, I personally think, and Via Lactea upholds, that integral spiritual accountability requires that you learn about and participate in the sovereignty efforts of the original ayahuasqueros, indigenous Amazonian groups and peoples who are currently fighting oil, timber, meat, and other extractive industries for their very survival. So that's being authentic as well, is just to be real about, what we're doing. And reparation is more than a moral or ethical stance. It's actually also a long game strategy of activism, because it provides the opportunity for healing. So sincerely understanding systemic oppression and allying with others to end it slowly moves us, as though on a spectrum, from somewhere on one side to somewhere on the opposite side. So on one side, we may have enjoyed and benefited from ignorance of both systemic injustice and of the incredible toll industrialized lifestyles take on the earth and on all ecosystems and all beings that she sustains. Or we may start on the opposite side of the spectrum, where human individuals and groups and beings and ecosystems have endured systems of domination and oppression already for hundreds and sometimes thousands of years, where those people and groups and systems have not been respected as beings deserving of full dignity and the same rights to thrive as some others. So consistent, committed reparation as a spiritual practice helps move those two ends of the spectrum closer together. First, because it is a meaningful, palpable way of acknowledging harm. And second, because offering financial support is a direct way of empowering individuals and groups working to end oppression. So this is a part of a larger national activist group that I am a part of, that is working at the intersection of racial healing and climate justice. And reparation is a big part of our praxis, because it facilitates that alliance between people, so that everyone gets that we're all facing the same oppressor. In this area of reparation, I like to rely upon an ancient European pagan principle of harmony and proportion to contextualize reparation as a practice. So I and my Irish-Italian immigrant family personally did not cause all of the oppression and harm that exists in the world today. And we're not responsible for all of global climate change. We're not responsible for everything. In Ireland, my potato famine ancestors were among the oppressed and dispossessed. But in the USA, they became police officers and benefited from enforcing systemic hierarchies. So I believe that integral spirituality demands that, to the best of my ability, I attempt to understand which sides of history my ancestors and I have been on, and then respond appropriately and proportionally to the extent that I have benefited from systems that oppress others and the earth. And then maybe I do just a little more than that for the sake of impact. And this brings us to relevance. It is a constant relational dialogue between ourselves, our families, our communities, our ecosystems, our ancestors, and all the beings in our awareness to determine if what we aspire to be doing or what we are actually doing is actually relevant. So in order to know that, we have to be able to invite and integrate feedback. Feedback is an essential element of any healthy system, human or environmental, and incorporating it into our practice is actually an art. And it is a very pleasant art once you get into it. Symbolically, natural flows, such as feedback. So feedback is a flow in a system. You put something out, you receive a return on it, and you integrate it, and then you put something out again, and it's a cycle. Natural flows such as feedback are believed to be represented in ancient pagan symbols such as the spiral, the zigzag, and the meander. So we at Via Lactea represent those symbols with the land when we work with water cycles. And we also have it as part of our integral practice with each other within the community, where we regularly practice that as part of our 3 agreements with each other. And going forward, we're just trusting in emergence and staying on the path. So that is my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions from anybody around. Yeah, hi there. Hi there. Look, it looks like some more folks have come in, and there's Maka in person.
Yes, Maka actually, she did. She shows up before you actually started speaking. So I think that was optimal. So yeah, if anybody has, first of all, thank you so much. What a remarkably well stated presentation. Does anybody have any questions for our speaker? This is your chance to ask anything you want.
I have so
Bart.
many, but I see other people. Go first.
Bart, we'll try to get like one. I know the feeling. Bart, we'll go ahead.
Well, thank you for such, the clarity is just blazing, and I'm very appreciative of that. You made one reference to how we face the same oppressor, and that made me wonder what kind of analysis you have of what that is.
Oh, well, thank you for that wonderful question. I'll try to be brief. It would be super easy for me to say capitalism, but I don't think it's as simple as that. Although I do think capitalism plays a part. I think that the thing we face is basically the simple idea of supremacy. The idea that some things, any things are supreme over other things. And that idea is very at odds with an animist worldview, which doesn't hold anything as supreme. It's always looking at the interrelationship, the dynamism, the interplay between all things. And it makes that supremacy, that hierarchization irrelevant. So it's an idea. And I think we internalize this very young. Yeah, I think we internalize it very young, and it's just tragic how we see it, where, for example, I'm involved with a group. I'm going to a conference to present with a group that is doing work in El Salvador, where the country is falling apart and the people who are largely indigenous are being completely destroyed by a dictatorial government that is targeting gangs. And so now everybody's in a gang, and half, the numbers of people that they've put in prison are phenomenal. The prison conditions are beyond belief, and very few people even know about this. Whereas, Ukraine, the Ukrainians, so I'm not going to say too much about that, but it seems like there are just certain areas of the globe where historically, hey, those people have always been oppressed. What are we going to do about it? Like, they're oppressed. It's okay. So that is the kind of thinking that I think all of us face. And it is, it's in the water.
That's excellent. We have about 5 minutes. So Alex, why don't you ask one of the most burning of the questions you have?
There's so many. I guess
I know.
Valerie, I was You mentioned you were doing work with Cherry Hill Seminary, and I happen to be living in Columbia, South Carolina, which is where like they're physically based out of. I guess I was wondering, in your honest opinion, in your experience so far, how has their programming like vibed with your anti-colonialist, decolonialist uh, stance and the like mentality that your community lives with?
Oh boy.
I
Well,
don't want to open up a can of worms here, but I guess
no,
I'm
not
wondering,
at all,
like,
not at all. So that's a wonderful question, and nobody's ever asked me that. I've never gotten to speak about that, and so I'm really grateful for the opportunity. I have to say that I am very particular about what I expect and receive from Cherry Hill, because for one thing, it's not a brick and mortar school, so I don't get to really interact very intimately with individuals. And I am there for particular academic, like pieces that I'm looking for. To answer your question, I have not been very impressed, but I think a lot of it is structural, just because it's an online school that kind of exists to serve a really broad demographic of people who are anywhere. And I haven't really seen places where they get into it. I did take a psychology class that focused on, it was like diversity and inclusion stuff. That was
if I can shift,
accurate.
then where can people go to learn more with the I'm like Bart said, the clarity with which you delivered your message was so striking. Where can people of a pagan persuasion go to learn more with that anti-colonialist mentality? Where can
Wow,
they find it?
that's another great one. So I'm involved, this national group that I onboarded with and took trainings with and then have done activism with. When I first showed up at that stuff, it was all Christians and Buddhists and Jews, and there wasn't I couldn't find a pagan. So that's when I decided I got to become a pagan minister so I can work in these kind of settings. I think interfaith. I think there's a lot going on, the embodied Buddhism, and there's Christian practice. And so I think I've experienced you have to make a lot of it up as you go. Maka, I'm sure, could better speak to that. There's a ton of things that go on in the Bay Area. Like, it is not robust like the Bay Area here in central New York at all. So for a pagan to find that stuff, I mean, you guys, your group is probably it, as far as I know. I don't know.
Yeah,
Okay.
as far as I know, and we're not specifically a pagan group either, because we are for anybody who sees the earth as sacred, and that has included like Christians. As far as we're concerned, you see the earth as sacred, you belong here. That is our only criteria. We do have a lot of pagans that show up because I think it's more inherent in almost, I'm not gonna say every pagan view, but it is very common. We have one.
Okay.
Maka, go ahead, because we only got 2 more minutes. Go for it.
I just was going to say Marin Interfaith Climate Action is a perfect example of that, because when we were writing our values statement, I came up against that. There were the nature is sacred or nature is a sacred trust. That mindset difference. Nature is sacred won out, I'm happy to say. I felt a little bit out of my depth theologically to deal with these other people, but I see a lot of interfaith people drifting more into a pagan and worldview kind of mindset. And I really want to circulate this video amongst my colleagues there. So
Yeah, well, I will make sure, because we have 1 more minute, I will make sure that once the video is given to me, that it is, of course, put on YouTube. And Maka, it will be, as always, I will share the link via our, Earth-Based Spiritual Action Team page. And also there's just the YouTube channel always has all our videos. So there's multiple ways you can get to this video and any of the other ones. Please do.
Yeah, I would like
too.
to circulate it, because I think more people need to hear it than.
Yeah, it was so well said. And with that, it is 5:30. So I'm going to really thank our guest and invite everybody to please come back and to consider picking up a phone or doing something for Citizen Climate Lobby, because they are an effective group and our voices still matter. And with that, have a great, great October. See you next month.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Blessings.
Blessings.
Thank you.